listening to America First Radio.
And we're gonna win, win, win. And we're gonna make America great again.
Here is your host, Paul Adams.
Hello, I'm Paul Adams, and welcome to America First Radio, where we engage in no-holds-barred civil conversation inside the untamed political jungle, where speaking your mind can be hazardous to your health or make you famous. Just today, I tweeted a video of Elizabeth Warren explaining way back in 2004 how Hillary is beholden to Wall Street. It's a must-see video, and you can find it at zip90210 on Twitter. Yeah, so ding, ding, ding. What prize do we have for Pocahontas Johnny with that famous video of hers? Moving on, we've got a lot of cover here. I loved Mr. Trump's economic speech. It doesn't get more detailed and more real than that, and it's funny how the left has criticized it as trickle-down economics. You know, because they like the path they are on, the path to oblivion, unemployment, total dependence on government, to keep the people in need for more empty speeches and false promises with every election, because they figure people always buy into the kabuki theater and the rhetoric. But, you know, not this time around, especially not after the stolen DNC nomination and not after the WikiLeaks revelations. We are now for once recognizing our blind spots, and the whole world knows who is pulling the levers behind the curtains. Today we just learned that thousands of emails on George Soros' server have been hacked, and they are leaked by WikiLeaks. In other breaking news, the DOJ and FBI are going for a full-blown investigation on Hillary Clinton's foundation, which should reveal that the foundation is involved in all kinds of influence peddling, you know, those pay-for-play schemes, dime a dozen, which, if true, will cave in Hillary's campaign. The story was released by the Daily Caller on August 11th. Will they give her a second pass like they did with the emails? Maybe. What do we have here? Let's not forget the Clintons will threaten to take down the whole government if they're about to go under themselves. Let's not forget the HSBC money laundering case of 2012, where HSBC got a slap on the wrist with a small $18 billion fine. Let's not forget James Comey, who was State of New York Attorney General in the Southern District, while Loretta Lynch was Attorney General for the State of New York in the Eastern District, and in charge of the HSBC case. Let's not forget HSBC has been involved in funding the Clinton Foundation, and that HSBC clients also funded the Clinton Foundation to the tune of $18 million. And most importantly, that James Comey became a HSBC director in 2013. I'll believe it when I see it. Also, WikiLeaks has released emails of Hillary's not-so-rosy medical records. As we know, she suffered a right transverse sinus thrombosis, which is medical lingo for a blood clot forming inside one of her brain sinuses. That clot cleared up with blood thinners, but there are lingering symptoms that even Huma Abedin discussed in emails. She points out that Hillary is often confused. We know her rallies only last about 10 minutes, and now she is requesting to be seated at the Trump debates. And at this point, what difference does it really make? As long as her diapers are triple-lined, Armani's. What else do we have? Roger Stone. Now, he worked for Reagan and Nixon, and he knows the political landscape like the back of his hand. He said, a number of New York Democrats, very prominent, well-known, wealthy New York Democrats, told him last year that Hillary had very significant health issues and that they were surprised that she was running in view of her health problems and her lack of stamina. Recently, we saw Hillary in one of her rallies freeze up when an animal rights activist shouted at her from 20 feet away. She literally froze, and you could see the fear set in her face. Then you notice a handler, a well-fed collared man holding a black auto-injection device with his left hand, come up to her and pat her on the back to calm her down. Who is this man? At first, I guessed he was a Secret Service agent. But we see him in other pictures walking alongside Hillary as he holds the same black auto-injection device in his left hand. And if you Google Hillary's handler, you'll see the pictures. Specifically, if you go to conservativetreehouse.com, you'll see the same man, a number of pictures with Hillary. Other websites have him seated in the front seat of a car, escorting her out of a hospital. Now, that's as far back as 2013. He does have a medic badge, so he's not Secret Service. Some say the medication is diazepam to treat anxiety and muscle spasms, possibly even convulsions. I'm not convinced that it's diazepam. The jury's out on that one, but her handler is definitely a medic, and he has been identified as Dr. Oladotun A. Okunola, MD, who is part of the prestigious neurology group Neuroscience Center of Northern New Jersey. He specializes in epilepsy, clinical neurophysiology, and sleep medicine. Then there are her chronic coughing fits. What is that an indication of? Does it relate at all to post-stroke symptoms? What about her sociopathic laughter at the most inappropriate times, like when she said about Gaddafi's death, we came, we saw, he died, and then she broke out in laughter? Who does that? Or the Benghazi hearings when she was asked whether or not she was alone the entire night of the Benghazi attacks and she bursts out in laughter. Who does that? You're in a very serious deposition and you break out laughing? You know, never mind that 4 people were killed because you were trying to make Obama look good in a re-election year by blaming the attacks on a video. Never mind that you had ample advance warnings that jihadists were going to commemorate the first 9/11 with their own Benghazi 9/11. And never mind that Ambassador Stevens had made over 600 requests for backup and was denied each time. Never mind all that. You have the nerve to laugh in your deposition. And here's the worst example of inappropriate laughter. She's being interviewed about the war in Iraq and about her book called Tough Choices. Listen to this.
As I say in my book, I made a mistake giving the Bush administration the authority that I voted for. It just shows you how hard it is to make these choices, which is why I'm calling the book Hard Choices.
Who laughs like that? I submit to you, only a sociopath. Now, what does this have to do with the price of tea in China? Everything. Everything. Everything is on the balance in this election, and the people have a right to know if the person they are electing is physically, emotionally, and mentally fit for the most important job in the world. Now, third on the list is her sanity. I found a video of Bill Clinton in which he states categorically that Hillary speaks with the dead, in particular with Eleanor Roosevelt, on a regular basis. You think I'm kidding? Here's a video, and you can listen to it yourself.
I think all of the people who were introduced and those who were not introduced, all of whom have made their contributions to America, many inspired by President Roosevelt. And a special thanks to the members of the Roosevelt family who are here, and to one who is not, Eleanor. I know that because, as all of you famously learned when I served as president, my wife, now the Secretary of State, was known to commune with Eleanor on a regular basis. And so she called me last night on her way home from Peru to remind me to say that Eleanor had talked to her and reminded her that I should say that.
Do you want a woman who speaks to the dead as president? All things being equal, for me, if she wasn't a traitor, if she wasn't a criminal, if she wasn't so physically sick, That alone would make me think twice about voting for her. We can't afford to rely on the advice of Eleanor Roosevelt in our day and age. Maybe if we were back in the 70s or 80s, speaking to Eleanor would have been kosher with me, but not in our day and age. Now, things are just too complicated. And I think Trump, who doesn't speak to the dead, would be a far better choice. I just have a hunch, all things being equal. Mr. Trump said, I think Hillary would make more money selling her speeches to people who can't sleep. Bill Clinton slept through her acceptance speech, and I think Trump is onto something. Now, seriously, folks, we live in very dangerous times. We live at a time when we have a lot of hot wars, a lot of hot spots. We have cyber wars, information wars, terrorist wars. We live in a time of dirty nukes, intellectual theft, lopsided trade deals, at a time when nations can be pillaged, plundered, and slaughtered for oil in the name of corporate profits. And we do this supposedly in the name of nation building, of course, to appease the masses, in the name of spreading democracy. Right, sure. We live in a time when we can see a lot of blowback from radical extremists. Imagine if Germany invaded our soil and wiped out 1 million Americans and tanked our economy. What would we do to get even? See, extremism doesn't just mushroom on its own. We need to look at the causes if we'll ever have peace in this world. Because when we keep meddling in other countries and pay mercenaries to do our dirty work, call them whatever you like, call them ISIS, Al-Qaeda, by any other brand, there will be blowback and hate and more terrorist attacks. It's all part of the globalist agenda to make America the object of hate and weaken it militarily, politically, and economically. So, America, you gotta wake up. We need the sharpest, brightest, healthiest, most sane person as President of the United States. And Hillary ain't any of the above. She is cunning, but she's also very sloppy. I mean, really, let's take a hard look at this, okay? Let's just pretend you placed me in the position of Secretary of State for 4 years, and I was the original classification authority. You know what that means? It means I had the final word and say on the classification of documents, whether they were emails or papers. And let's say at the end of the term, I reported back to the American people, and on 22 different occasions, public forums, I said that I, during the entire 4 years of my tenure as Secretary of State, I did not send or receive any classified emails. What would you tell me? What would be your reaction? You would know that I would be lying through my teeth, because it was my job to do exactly that, to send and receive classified emails. So Hillary is definitely not it, not by a long shot. And I suspect she ran for president only to obtain some public favor, because she knew indictments would be much harsher if she was investigated as a private citizen. So what better scam, what better smokescreen than run for president of the United States? But of course, the globalists also want Hillary for president. She's perfect for that role. She's controllable, corruptible, and if she's also in poor health, well, that's a bonus. Then they can keep her in suspended animation as the manipulator. Trump is the globalist's worst nightmare. He can't be bought, he can't be controlled. And if he gets in, let me rephrase that. When he gets in, 40 years of neocon and progressive policies will disappear. All that work of dumbing down America with Common Core, the enslavement of the population to handouts, entitlements, the outsourcing of jobs, preparing the masses to getting used to low expectations, all that will come to an end. Trump is a threat to the globalists. When Hillary promises to raise taxes on the middle class to the tune of $1.3 billion, does it sound to you like a pro-American stance? Think about it. After the middle class has already exported all its jobs abroad, after it bailed out the too-big-to-fail banks, after it sacrificed its best and brightest in wars for profit, in wars that enriched only the few at the top, does piling up a tax hike on the middle class sound to you like a pro-American gesture or a pro-globalist takedown move? You figure it out. Okay, in other news, Mitt Romney was spotted bare-chested in a wrestling ring wearing a red cape, red trunks, and baby blue leotards. And he actually looks happy in the picture. I'm happy for him. He finally found his niche, I suppose. I have to use him as a segue here. You remember back in 2012 when Ron Paul was campaigning against Romney? Who was packing the stadiums? Ron Paul. Romney couldn't fill Luigi's banquet hall. What's my point? Let's not get too cocky. We see all these packed stadiums, packed Trump rallies, compared to Hillary's small coffee and donuts events. And this happened also with Bernie's crowds. He had massive crowds. And lo and behold, Hillary stole the nomination right from under Bernie. Who won the Republican nomination in 2012? Mitt Romney. Who won the election? Obama, a third-rate nonentity that came out of nowhere. And he won it because he used the first black president card, just like Hillary is using the first woman president card. Same playbook, different horses. Someone just tweeted me the other day about the FBI investigation into the Clinton Foundation. Quote, "She's Teflon. Nothing will come of it." End of quote. And I agree. The fix has to be in. Okay, this is just going through the motions to look like something is being done about it. So my one and only concern, which is everyone's concern, including Mr. Trump's, is that the election will be stolen just as the nomination was stolen from Bernie Sanders and from Ron Paul in 2012. You know, you can have the best candidate, you can have the best social network of meme creators fighting for you. You can have the top policy advisors, the most logical, concise, cogent platform, and you can be fighting opposite the weakest opponent. But if the system is rigged against you, if the voting machines are programmed to elect Hillary, what can you do? It's like trying to launch a rocket without an ignition switch. You do all that work and you can't get off the ground. You know, some people have suggested taking a picture of your voting ballot and mailing it to the Trump campaign. I just can't see the Trump campaign sorting through 40 million ballots. There has to be a better solution. I proposed my solution in the previous podcast, which is to build an online, secure, and I'm talking triple encrypted U.S. citizen account where citizens can go online just as they would with their online bank account and vote on bills, vote in elections, impeach presidents, recall senators, ratify amendments, and finally have a government that is of, by, and for the people, not of, by, and for the elite. So for the time being, we have to deal with the current system. But I just want to ask, what measures is Mr. Trump's team taking to ensure the election will not be stolen from him? The people have a right to know the answer to the question. We have sacrificed our means, our talents, our time to get Mr. Trump elected, and we want a free and fair election. You know, the kind of democracy we like to think we are exporting to other nations? telling us that it will be fair or we'll try to make sure it's fair, it just doesn't cut it. We want absolute guarantees because we've seen this movie once too many times. Okay, folks, now I want us to zoom back and look at this mess from 100,000 feet. The puppet masters are behind the two-party system. The two-party system is an old and tired playbook that is alienating more and more people as we wake up to reality. This tug of war every 4 years, that pits us against each other, is just a divide and conquer strategy used by the globalists, the banks, the military security system, and all their shills. Here's how I think we should be looking at the world. A nation is very much like a household. A household, starts small. People come out of college, they're in debt. There's very little cash flowing in. They scrape and save to buy a car. They put a down payment on a small home. They may have to borrow from mom and dad. Then you land a great job. And in our day and age, that's hard to imagine. People are graduating and living with their parents. But there was a time when you graduated and you landed a great job. The jobs, of course, today have all been exported, all the good ones. Or we bring in people and hire them temporarily, foreigners. But normally you land a job after you graduate, and the money starts pouring in. Years pass, you upgrade the home, the car, or you get a second car, and you start saving and investing for the future. So you may hit some bumps along the way, you ride the storms, and you come out wiser and stronger. You may even hit some really, really rough patches where you may think it's all over, and you may even need to be bailed out or go bankrupt, but somehow you pull yourself back up by your bootstraps, dust yourself off, and you place one foot ahead of the other. You bounce back eventually. You live and learn. It's called life. But you don't call yourself a socialist or a capitalist, a liberal or a conservative while you're going through this journey of life. You roll with the punches. You stay flexible. The old beatitude, blessed are the flexible, for they will not be bent out of shape. The same holds true of a nation. It goes through similar cycles. So why should we flail in the wind every 4 years trying to decide whether to vote liberal or conservative? Is abortion and gay rights the only thing that separates us, really? It keeps us at opposite corners? The only real decision should be between globalism and nationalism. But globalists know how to muddle things up, to keep us off balance. So they create a two-party system. They are the masters of the universe. I'm talking about the families that control the wealth of nations and fund both sides of global conflicts. They care about one thing when it comes to election time, and that is there a candidate that is controllable, malleable, that we can influence? They couldn't care less if he's a Democrat or Republican, if it's a George Bush or Hillary Clinton, as long as they are easily manageable. And do they have enough dirt on this person to blackmail him or her? Well, with Trump, we know he's not going to be controlled by anyone. He's not blackmailable, and he's not manageable. Hence, the battle to knock him off the race. I want us to go back in time because history can teach us a lot of lessons. In 1913, for president, the masters of the universe picked a professor of political science with the personality of a cold pastrami sandwich. He was their perfect puppet. Under his presidency, the Federal Reserve Bank Act and the Income Tax Act came into being. All the while, he was campaigning against tariffs and inflation, the very thing the Federal Reserve Bank, or the Fed as it's affectionately known, is capable of creating. Inflation or creating bubbles like the 2008 housing bubble. And, of course, the Federal Reserve Bank is as Federal Express. It's an unaccountable, privately owned club that lends money with interest to the United States. The money is neither backed by gold or other precious commodity, but created into digital form instantly with the push of a few keystrokes. It's the same way your local bank creates a loan or a credit card company offers you credit. It's money created out of nothing. You and I don't have that ability or privilege to create money out of nothing. They'll put us in jail if we do. But we are led to believe that the too big to fail banks that can create money out of nothing need our help when it's time to bail them out. Anyway, I'm digressing here. Let's go back to the 1912 election. I'm getting off track here. The person they selected, they probably gave them two options. Either you're with us in creating this Federal Reserve Bank, or you are against us. If you are against us, we can live with that, but you may not be able to. The puppet retired from politics, a very wealthy man. His name is Woodrow Wilson, an aloof, introverted academic who considered himself not so much a leader, but more of a colleague or a collaborator among equals. He served for 2 terms from 1913 to 1921. He did lower tariffs. He did expand regulations for big business. And he did start the League of Nations, which was a precursor to the United Nations. He also took America into World War I for good measure. Does it all sound familiar? The first push towards globalism. World War I was dubbed by Americans very enthusiastically, I might add, as the Great Adventure. Men were lining up 3 deep to enlist. They just couldn't get to the killing fields fast enough. Let's hear Woodrow Wilson speak and listen how he downplays prosperity and beats the tariffs and regulations drum. Here he is.
The tariff question, as dealt with in our time, has not been business. It has been politics. Tariff schedules have been made up for the purpose of keeping as large a number as possible of the rich and influential manufacturers of the country in a good humor with the Republican Party, which desired their constant financial support. The tariff has become a system of favors. It becomes a matter of business, of legitimate business, only when the partnership and understanding it represents is between the leaders of Congress and the whole people of the United States, instead of between the leaders of Congress and small groups of manufacturers demanding special recognition and consideration. That is why the general idea of representative government becomes a necessary part of the tariff question. What has the result been? Prosperity? Yes, if by prosperity you mean vast wealth, no matter how distributed, or whether distributed at all or not. If you mean vast enterprises built up to be presently concentrated under the control of comparatively small bodies of men, who can determine almost at pleasure whether there shall be competition or not, the nation as a whole has grown immensely rich. But what of the other side of the picture? It is not as easy for us to live as it used to be. Our money will not buy as much. High wages, even when we get them, yield us no great comfort. We used to be better off with less because a dollar could buy so much more. The majority of us have been disturbed to find ourselves growing poorer, even though our earnings were slowly increasing. Prices climb faster than we can push our earnings up. Moreover, we begin to perceive some things about the movement of prices that concern us very deeply and fix our attention upon the tariff schedules with a more definite determination than ever to get to the bottom of this matter. We know that they are not fixed by the competitions of the market or by the ancient law of supply and demand, but by private arrangements with regard to what the supply should be and agreements among the producers themselves. The high cost of living is arranged by private understanding.
So why do we look backwards? Well, every so often it pays to look back and see who profited and who didn't in misadventures like Iraq, Libya, Syria. Because we're coming up to 100 years now since we entered World War I. How many wars have been fought since 1917 and why? You can do your own research. You can read the book called War is a Racket. It explains it. Woodrow Wilson tried to make the world safe for democracies. He considered any war a sort of crusade for democracy. And for the U.S. to become militarily involved in military conflicts was not just projection of military might or a display of American manhood as it had been for his predecessor, Teddy Roosevelt. But no, now war had a higher purpose. War was an instrument for the spread of democracy. Sound familiar? Roosevelt, his predecessor, was more of a naive imperialist who believed nations proved themselves through war, whereas Wilson thought wars were justified in creating freedom in far-flung places around the globe. So he introduced the doctrine of interventionism. But here we are 100 years later, realizing our elections have been rigged all along, and we ask ourselves, what business do we have spreading our brand of democracy around when we can't even guarantee our voting machines are not rigged? We are slowly waking up to the fact that, as George W. Bush put it in an interview, he said, commercial interests trump national security sometimes, and also that finding the right pretext for war is becoming increasingly harder. Finding the narratives that can be easily sold to the masses is taking a lot more effort. People are waking up. We are running out of boogeyman to demonize and for savage nations to democratize. The American brand of democracy is as popular as spoiled milk. So we have to go back to the drawing board. If exporting wars is not what America should be about in an age of social media, when video clips can be uploaded to the internet in a flash to give us a true picture of reality, when the mainstream media is going the way of the dinosaur, then what is America really all about? I submit to you, it's all about reinventing itself, which includes reinventing the democratic process, the Constitution. When WikiLeaks can give us the true reasons wars are being fought and how nominations are being stolen, suddenly political parties are also losing their sparkle. Are the controllers not seeing this? Is Brzezinski, Kissinger, Soros, the neocons and xio-globalists not taking notes? You know your days are numbered. You have to give it up at some point. Just retire somewhere. The kabuki theater is over. We know what you're up to. You have been promoting both parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. Both parties have started wars. Both parties have raised the national debt. Both have been complicit with the same enemy. Just think. Back in 2017, Woodrow Wilson arrested people for what they would say about World War I. Sounds like what George W. Bush said after 9/11. You're either with us or against us. It means simply this. We need a president who is flexible, who is aware, awake, who is not controllable. Flexible in the sense that he's not confined by either liberal or conservative policies. He's not strapped to ideologies that will hem us in, but understands fully that excessive protracted redistribution of wealth creates dependence on handouts, and dependence saps individuals of their creativity and passion for life. This person can only be Donald Trump. I believe that Mr. Trump fully understands how we got here and what we need to do to get ourselves back on track. I want to conclude this episode with an audio clip of Ronald Reagan. My favorite line in here is, "There is no left or right, only up or down." Take a listen.
I have spent most of my life as a Democrat. I recently have seen fit to follow another course. I believe that the issues confronting us cross party lines. Now, One side in this campaign has been telling us that the issues of this election are the maintenance of peace and prosperity. The line has been used, we've never had it so good. But I have an uncomfortable feeling that this prosperity isn't something on which we can base our hopes for the future. No nation in history has ever survived a tax burden that reached a third of its national income. Today, 37 cents out of every dollar earned in this country is the tax collector's share. And yet our government continues to spend $17 million a day more than the government takes in. We haven't balanced our budget 28 out of the last 34 years. We've raised our debt limit 3 times in the last 12 months. And now our national debt is 1.5 times bigger than all the combined debts of all the nations of the world. We have $15 billion in gold in our treasury. We don't own an ounce. Foreign dollar claims are $27.3 billion. And we've just had announced that the dollar of 1939 will now purchase 45 cents in its total value. As for the peace that we would preserve, I wonder who among us would like to approach the wife or mother whose husband or son has died in South Vietnam and ask them if they think this is a peace that should be maintained indefinitely. Do they mean peace, or do they mean we just want to be left in peace? There can be no real peace while one American is dying someplace in the world for the rest of us. We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening. Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. Not too long ago, 2 friends of mine were talking to a Cuban refugee, a businessman who had escaped from Castro. And in the midst of his story, one of my friends turned to the other and said, "We don't know how lucky we are." And the Cuban stopped and said, "How lucky you are. I had some place to escape to." And in that sentence, he told us the entire story. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. You and I are told increasingly we have to choose between a left or right. Well, I'd like to suggest there is no such thing as a left or right. There's only an up or down. Man's old age dream, the ultimate in individual freedom consistent with law and order, or down to the ant-heap of totalitarianism. And regardless of their sincerity, their humanitarian motives, those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. In this vote harvesting time, they use terms like the Great Society, or as we were told a few days ago by the President, we must accept a greater government activity in the affairs of the people. But they've been a little more explicit in the past, and among themselves, and all of the things I now will quote have appeared in print. These are not Republican accusations. For example, they have voices that say the Cold War will end through our acceptance of a not undemocratic socialism. Another voice says the profit motive has become outmoded. It must be replaced by the incentives of the welfare state. Or our traditional system of individual freedom is incapable of solving the complex problems of the 20th century. Senator Fulbright has said at Stanford University that the Constitution is outmoded. He referred to the President as our moral teacher and our leader. And he says he is hobbled in his task by the restrictions of power imposed on him by this antiquated document. He must be freed so that he can do for us what he knows is best.
Till next time, God bless Mr. Trump, and God bless America.